Great. Okay, so guys, let me not waste any more time. I just want to quickly get into this lesson. So all of you are able to see clearly on my whiteboard, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 100%. So in that case, guys, for today's lesson, we'll be looking at functions. So I just want to quickly take you through all that you need to know regarding a straight line or linear function. So as part of your notes, you can still write a linear, but I think what I'm going to do is to share all the notes that I've made. So I'll just take a photo and send in the group. So we've got what we call linear function. So this is also called a straight line. So the moment we talk about a linear function, you know we are talking about a straight line. So the word linear goes in hand with straight. So don't get confused when sometimes they call a straight line a linear function, or otherwise they call a linear function a straight line. So there is a standard form in which we represent a linear function or a straight line. So this is the form which is f of x, it's equals to ax plus, it could be q, sometimes they use c. So again, you can represent this as y is equals to mx plus c. So this is almost one and the same thing, guys. So the moment you see f of x, h of x, g of x, don't get confused. It simply refers to the corresponding y value. So the reason why sometimes they represent it as
Sir, is that G or Q?
it's q.
Oh,
So it's always q. So what I wanted to explain, CK, is that the reason why they may say f of x is because on a Cartesian plane, you might have one straight line graph, another straight line graph, another straight line graph. So on this Cartesian plane of y axis and x axis, you've got 1, 2, 3 straight line graphs. Can you see? So for us to differentiate these graphs, we make use of the letters. So we can say this is the graph of G, this is the graph of F, and this is the graph of H. So can you see it's now easy. When we want to talk about that straight line, we'll talk about the graph of H. When we want to talk about that one, the graph of G, the graph of F. So that is why we are going to say this one or that line is f of x, which is equals to whatever in that form of either ax plus q, but in a form of numbers. So when we want to talk about that one, we are going to say this is h of x, which is equals to ax plus q or c. When we want to talk about that one, we're going to say this is the graph of g of x, it's equals to whatever. So guys, if we say y is equals to mx plus c, is just a general form of a straight line. So in that way, we are not specifying to say, in this case, we're talking about that type of a graph or that one or that function. The moment we say f, then we are forced to say f of x. So f of x, in short, it simply says the function of x. Y and f of whatever, or g of whatever, or h of x, it's one and the same. Do not confuse those. So what I was explaining here is for you to understand why a graph may be called f of x, g of x, h of x, or whatever the name of the graph is. Remember, it could be any letter from A up to Z, but in most cases, they like using f of x, h of x, and g of x. Guys, do you understand everything that I've explained so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 100%. So, what does A represent? It's either a it's A in that case, or otherwise we can say M. So my question is, what does A or M represent? Is there someone who wants to give it a guess based on our yesterday's lesson? Okay, it's fine. I'll explain. So
It's
A,
the Canadian, sir.
okay, 100%. So A refers to the gradient. So A refers to the gradient. And what is the formula for the gradient? That means A or M is going to be equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that's how you calculate the gradient. And then now, what about Q or C? What does that represent? Obviously, we said it represents the y-intercept. So, in short, we are saying wherever the straight line cuts the vertical axis, which is the y-axis, so that is what we call, or that is what represents the Q or the C. So our graph could be like that, it could be like that, it could be like that, it could be like that. Remember, we have that x-axis. But when we talk about Q or C, we are not interested that much with the x-axis. We are only concentrating on the y-axis. So for that line number 1, line number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, when we talk about Q or C of that particular line, for line number 1, we are talking about that point. This is the y-intercept, so we must know that value, or we must calculate, or it must be given. So for line number 2, this is the Q or C. For line number 3 is there. For line number 4 is that one over there. For line number 5 is that one over there. So you will understand better as we proceed with our lesson. So the other thing that I want to explain to you guys, it's 4 types of scenarios, actually 5. So as part of your notes, you can still write or draw that Cartesian plane over there, where we've got the y-axis and we've got the x-axis. So you can have a straight line graph passing through that point. So let's say this is the graph of y. So my question to you guys, what is that point where that straight line graph passes through?
X-axis, sir.
Okay, so remember guys, always when your straight line graph passes that point, we say it passes the origin. This is what we call the origin, not only the x-axis, whoever commented, because at that point, that's where you have the y and the x-axis intersect. So at that point, we call that point the origin. That's where we've got 0 sy and 0 sx. So this is the starting point of the y-axis and the starting point of the x-axis. That's why we say is the origin. So for every straight line that passes through the origin. That's where we know that this is the graph of y. It's equals to x. So this is where y is equals to x. So my question to you guys, let me not put it in a form of a question, but I'll just explain. I'll ask you this in future. So for that graph that passes through the origin, that's where, remember, this is the equation of that graph. So we need to know what is the A for that graph, what is the Q for that graph. So that means that is the same as y. It's equals to, remember, this is the standard form, ax plus q. So that means y, which is that y, it's equals to 1 being a, that invisible 1 over there, x plus what is q? Q is 0. Why is it 0? Because that line touches the y-axis at that point where we know it's 0. So because it's not necessary to write that invisible 1 and that 0, that is why we just say y is equals to x. So for a straight line passing through the origin, we know it's y is equals to x. But remember, guys, remember, that gradient, in this case, it's 1. In some instances, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be whatever. So when your gradient is 1, so it's more like where your x value, for example, is 1, where your x value is 2, where your x value is 3, where your x value is 4. The corresponding y value is going to be 1. The corresponding y value is going to be 2. So that means where x is whatever value, it will be the same as y. So what if we now have another straight line passing through that origin? Can you see now? Obviously, the gradient is different in that case. So you might find that for this line, it's y is equals to, the gradient maybe is half x. Can you see? So in this case, where you have that, it means in this case, your a is 1 over 2, and then your q, it's still 0. So your graph, or your second graph, is the same as y is equals to 1 over 2. So what does it mean? It means where you've got your x value as 1, you just substitute it there. So it's more like y is equals to 1 over 2 into 1, which is the same as 1 over 2. So where your x value is 1, it means your corresponding y value is half. What about that point where x is 2? You just substitute. Where x is 2, you substitute there, so that times that is the same as 1. So that means where your x value is 2, the y value is 1. You can perform the calculations for every x value. It will tell you the corresponding y value. So guys, any questions regarding what I've explained so far?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so guys, always notice what I do when I draw a graph. You firstly draw the axis, which is the x-axis and the y-axis at all times. Make sure that when you draw a functions or graph, you firstly start with your axis being the x and the y-axis. Then after, you can draw your function. So now I want to explain that type of a graph. Remember, based on my yesterday's lesson, I indicated that for this type of a graph, that's where you've got a negative gradient. Okay, so let's say also this is a straight line graph where it's y is equals to mx plus c. Okay, so let's talk, or obviously you can still have it. Let's say this is the graph of f, then it means this is f of x, function of x is equals to a x plus q. Doesn't matter. This is just a general form, guys. It's more like a formula for a straight line, just like your formula for a sequence and series. It's a plus n minus 1d. Doesn't change. You just need to know what is that one, what is that, what is that, what is that. So for this one, all of those we can still know or calculate what are those variables, or otherwise we can just pick them up from a straight line. So what I wanted to explain here, guys, is the f is gradient. Let's say m or a. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the gradient. So because the gradient is negative, we say it's more like that's where we have negative gradient. So every time when they say something is less than 0, in other words, they are saying it's a negative value. So guys, do you understand that part that I've explained so far?
No, sir.
What's the question, Sid?
I'm not sure if it's your network or mine, sir, but you kept on stopping while you were talking.
Okay, let me try to explain again. I was saying, guys, notice always when I draw functions, I firstly start with the axis. So you must first start with the x-axis, then the y-axis. Then after, you can draw your function. So in this case, we've got a straight line, of which we know the general form for a straight line is y is equals to a mx plus c, or otherwise, if we say this is the graph of g, then that means it's g of x, it's equals to ax plus q. So I'm using both forms just in case in class they teach you using y is equals to whatever, then you can still be accommodated. Same goes for g of x. So what I'm explaining in this case is that based on our lesson that we had yesterday, I said for this type of a graph, this is where you've got a negative gradient. So remember, a gradient there is represented by m, and again it's represented by a. So when we say we've got a negative gradient, we say m or a is less than 0. So that means when you have a this type of a straight line, you've got a negative gradient. So it's the same as m is less than 0. If you use a, you can say a is less than 0. In other words, they are saying we are having a negative gradient for this type of a straight line. Remember, for a straight line, you can have a one in that direction or the other one in that direction. Did you get all of that, Sihle?
Yes, sir.
No questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me now do the second explanation. So let's say we've got remember guys, you firstly start with the axis. You can either start with the y-axis, then followed by the x-axis. Very, very much important, ladies and gentlemen. So now, in this case, let's say we've got that type of a graph. Let's call it the graph of h. Because it's a straight line, then it means we know this is the general form for that straight line. Otherwise, you can say because it's a graph of h, then we say h of x, it's equals to ax plus q. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this case, because we've got that type of a line, it means that's where either a, if you like, m, in this case, is greater than 0. What are we saying? In short, we are saying that line has got a positive gradient. So that's it in short with regards to this one. So the other thing that I had to explain for this graph and the previous one is that in this case, let's make a comment on Q. So what is Q? Remember, Q is the same as C for both of these standard forms. So in this case, we've got our Q or C being greater than 0. I'm not sure if that makes sense, guys. So we've got our Q greater than 0 because this is the point of origin. So wherever or from that point of origin in that direction, or from that point going up, you've got positive values. From that point going down, you've got negative values. So that means if that graph was below the origin, then it means our Q was going to be less than 0, which means we're going to have a negative Q because that straight line is below the origin. So for the previous graph that I drew or that I explained, that means for this one was going to be less than a 0. Why less than 0? Because it's below the origin. So guys, before I go any far, did you get all of that? Did all of that make any sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Okay, 100%. Someone, is there someone who's got a question? Okay, so guys, we've got the x-axis and the y-axis. Always know that this point is the origin. Make sure that you never forget that. So what if we've got a straight line parallel to the x-axis? So let's call it a G, okay? So in that case, guys, in that case, you've got a straight line. So that means a straight line, it could be in any direction, guys. Now I'm going to explain a straight line which is parallel to the x-axis, which is that straight line. So you can have straight line in any direction, guys, in any direction, which means we can still have a straight line as a vertical line, which is what I'm going to explain next. So you can have a straight line in any direction. So for this one, which is a straight line being parallel to the x-axis, in this case, remember, the form is still as y is equals to mx plus c, okay? So in this case, what is the gradient? Obviously, the gradient being m, or otherwise, if you say g of x is equals to ax plus q, if you comment using a, so the gradient in that case, guys, it's equals to 0. It's more like they're asking you what is the steepness of that line. So if you want to test using the equation of the gradient, you know, obvious, let's say you've got that point and that point. Let's do that and say maybe that point over there, or let's say this is A, where A we've got let's say negative 3, and the y value is negative 4. And then we've got another point B where the x value, let's say, is 3, and again, what is the y value is 4, because the y value is that one over there. So if you want to calculate the m or a, this is equals to y2. What is y2? Let's say y2, it's that one which is negative 4 minus y1 which is in brackets that one being negative 4. What about x2? It's going to be that one minus x1 being negative 3. So if you punch all of this on a calculator, I think it's negative 4 minus into minus, it becomes 4. Then you have 0 at the top divided by 3 minus plus, it becomes 6. So what is 0 over 6? This is equals to 0. So that is why we say for a straight line like that, that's where the gradient is 0. Okay, so let's make a comment on the Q. What about that Q? So the Q value is going to be equals to the Y value. So how is it the case that the Q is going to be equals to the Y value? It's because already we know that G of X, which is that line, we already know that the gradient is 0x then plus Q. Okay, so that means because anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So that means 0 being the gradient multiplied by x, already that is 0. So we have g of x being equals to a q, the q being the y value. So how is it written as q is equals to y? Remember, a g of x is actually y in other words. Okay, so otherwise, if you wanted to understand fully, you can still use that form to explain. So it's y is equals to mx plus c. We know y is y. M is 0 multiplied by x plus c. Because already this is 0, then y is the same as c. Same explanation goes for both. So guys, any questions so far?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so now let's have a look at a situation where we've got that one being the graph of h. So let's make comments on that one. So remember, it's y is equals to mx plus c. Otherwise, it's going to be h of x is equals to ax plus q. So what is m in this case? Let's say, for example, that point over there, it was let's see 1 2. Okay, let's say x 1 2 3. Okay, let's say x was 3 there, and again the y value was 3 at that point. Remember, the corresponding y value versus the corresponding x value. And then let's now talk about that one over there and say maybe this is a negative 1. So that means this is point number A, this is point number B, where the x value it's still 3, but the y value it's negative, let's say negative 2, positive 1, positive 2, positive 3. So it's negative 2. So I'm going to ask you a question, guys. Is there someone who wants to tell me what is the Q value or the C value?
Sir, is it possible to solve the y-intercept because there's no connection from the graph that's shown, like the graph that you have shown us now?
So, Sihle, that means no C value, no Y, no Q value. So, you cannot solve, you just say no value. The reason is what you explained is because that line, it doesn't touch the y-axis, or it doesn't intercept the y-axis. So that question has got an answer to your question. So you don't solve, but you just say no y value. You cannot solve. So I'm going to explain the gradient. So let's see. The gradient, obviously, we know is y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So let's try to substitute these two values. So that means let's say that is the y2, it's 3 minus that, which is minus 2, being the second, what is it? The second y value, and then we have 3 being the x2 minus x1. So we're going to have that times that is plus, then we have 5 divided by 0. So 5 divided by 0, anything divided by 0 is undefined, or otherwise it gives you an error. So that means for this type of a graph, M or A is undefined. So, ladies and gentlemen, does it make sense? Did all of that make sense?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Ustad.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 100%. So now I'm going to give you a summary. So this is the end of what you need to know regarding a straight line. So I used grade 10 textbook to prepare for this lesson. I can't remember if I used grade 10, 11, or 12, but I think I used grade 12 book to prepare for this lesson. So this lesson is suitable for grade 10s, 11, and 12 learners, and also those who are upgrading their mathematics. So, you need this information, even though it's a grade 12 information, but you'll still be applying the same principles in grade 10, 11, and 12. So it's very, very much important that you learn this stuff. Remember, I'm going to send you the notes, the general notes that I made. And again, in case if you forget something, you can catch up or watch this lesson again. It's being recorded. I'm going to post it. So just in case, as we go deeper and you get lost, remember to go back to this lesson and watch it again. So if you watch it again and you've got some questions, that's when you can ask me. But if you don't watch it, no questions to be asked, because you'll be asking something which is already there online. So just a summary of what I've explained. I said you might have a graph passing through the origin. Remember, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. For the fact that it's passing through the origin, then it means we don't have a q. I mean, the q is 0. So either q or c is equals to 0 in this case. So depending on the gradient, you can have y is equals to whatever gradient x. So the q is 0. So this is an equation for a straight line passing through the origin. And then the other one that I've explained That's where you have the y-axis and you've got the x-axis, and we've got that type of a straight line where I said the gradient is going to be negative gradient. And again, the C value, because this straight line is below the origin, then it means the C value is also going to be a negative value. And again, for a situation, maybe when we have that, this is x-axis, and then this is a straight line. So in this case, the M is a positive gradient. And then in terms of the C, it's going to be a positive C, because the y value or the y-intercept is above the origin. So for that one, it means you are still going to have a positive gradient, but in terms of your C, it's going to be negative. Be careful of that. And again, I've explained, I think also, this is the same explanation for that one over there. So it's the same thing. For that one, we're going to have a negative gradient, but our C value for this one is going to be positive. C value for that one is going to be negative. I hope you fully understand why. And again, we had a Y and X where we've got, what is it? We've got that straight line where the M is equals to, if I remember, it's 0 there, and then your, what is it, your Q is equal to whatever Y value that it is. And again, I've just explained this one where we said no Q value or C value, and then the gradient is undefined. So guys, this is all that you need to know regarding a straight line. So is there someone who's got a question, or can I teach you now how to plot a straight line graph?
Sir, where you said Q is equals to Y, previously you said Q is undefined.
Mm-hmm. So previously, Sitle, it's not Q which is undefined, it's M which is it's just that I've erased it. Let me do this. So just Q because here that line of G, it doesn't touch the Y value. That's why we said Q has no value. I'm not sure if you remember, guys. Then we said gradient, when you calculate y2 minus y1 over that, we ended up having 0 over 6, and we said 0 divided by a number. Like that, 0, 6 was 6 over 8, number 0 is undefined. Then we have either error or undefined. Guys, uh, Is this what I explained? So see, which is defined out a case number 2 is M which is Q. So you might plot a straight line through point A being -3 and 4, and point B being 3 and 5. And again, they might give you a graph similar to that one where you've got Y, where you've got X, and they just do something like that. This is 5, and they give you a point over there where they say that point is 7 and -4. So for the first case, they say you must plot. So when you plot, you firstly need to do your Cartesian plane. So you've got Y, you've got X. So you need to plot this on your Cartesian plane. You firstly make dots. Let's make that dot. So remember, always the coordinates, you have X followed by Y. You have X followed by Y. So what is X? X is negative, so that means it's on this side. So let's say -1, -2, -3. But the corresponding Y value is on the positive side. So that means you're going to have 1, 2, 3, let's say 4. So that point A, that's where X is actually 3 and Y is 4. So that point A, it's a point over there. Let's plot that point over there. So X is +3, so we have 1, 2, 3, and then Y is positive, what is it, Y? It's +5. So that means we have to extend that x-axis. So can you see the tricky part? You need to make sure that everything fits in your Cartesian plane. So there we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over there. So that means the next point, that's where X is, that is 3, Y is that. Then you have where's number 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then it's somewhere there. So what you do is just to join those two lines with a ruler. Then if they said plot a straight line G with these 2 points, then you can just say this is the graph of G. You show with the arrows there that it continues up to infinity. So this is how you plot a graph when you're given 2 points. So what does it mean, guys? It means for you to plot, you must have 2 points. Write this as part of your notes. It's massively important, guys. For you to plot, you must have 2 points, which means for you to determine an equation, you must still have 2 points, okay? So otherwise, in this case, let's say we must have 2 points. If you do not have 2 points, you must have something, either the gradient, then after they give you the gradient, and just 1 point. So it's either they give you 2 points, or if they don't give you 2 points, they give you 1 point, but they must also give you the gradient. Okay, so now for case number 2, they say determine an equation of straight line H in the form y is equals to mx plus c. So that is the question, guys. So in this case, you need to firstly find your gradient. That is step number 1. So in answering, let's say step number 1, you must find gradient. Then step number 2, you must find the C value. Then after you found those values, you just substitute there and substitute there and write it as y is equals to whatever gradient plus whatever that you calculated. So let's see how you do it. Obviously, you know gradient is equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what are your 2 points? You can see there it's 0.5, there it's 7 and -4. So that means point number 1, that's where you've got your x value being 0, your y value being 5. So they don't have to write that point in that form of brackets. They just say 5 there, or they can say 7, 2, or 3. You know, at that point, that's where x is 0. So point number 2, which is that one, you've got 7 and negative 4. So you just substitute there. Let's say this is our second values, this is our first values. So y2 is going to be negative 4 minus y1 is 5. I mean y2, x2 is 7 minus what is it? No, x2, yes, x2. Wait, guys. X2 is 7 years, and then x1 is 0. So we have negative, I think at the top is negative 9 over 7. So can you see when you punch negative 7 over 7, negative 9 over 7, let's see, negative 9 over 7, it remains as that. So that means you have calculated your gradient. So that means so far you have y is equals to, it's negative 9 over 7x plus c. So can you see, guys, it gives you the confidence when you have a negative value, because for that type of a line, you know m is negative because of that line which is in that direction. Remember from this notes, let's see, we have this type of a line, we know the the gradient is negative. Let's check, it's above the origin, so that means our c value must be positive. If you get a negative number, then you know you've done sorry, you've done something wrong. But already we can use that point that has a 0. So it's easy to calculate using the coordinates that has 0, because you just say, you know, your y value is 5, it's equals to, this is your gradient over there, your x value is 0 plus that. So you know the whole of this is 0 because you're multiplying the gradient by 0. So that means you see it's equals to 5. Then in answering the question, you don't end it there. You have to write to say y it's equals to negative 9 over 7x plus 5. So you've got a mark for writing that as your final answer. So ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our lesson. What I'm going to do is to give you the notes, and again, I'm going to give you a homework that you can work on for tomorrow and possibly over the weekend. Then I'll see when we'll do corrections for that homework. So in case if you've got a lot of work, I'll extend the time. So guys, did all of that make sense? Everything that I've explained, does it make sense to everyone?
Say for me, yes.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Lerato, are you on the line? Because I remember yesterday you said you did not
Yes,
do
sir.
straight.
I'm on the line.
Did you understand everything regarding a straight line function?
I understood, sir, some of it.
So my advice to you and everyone else who couldn't grab everything, remember, I will post this lesson tomorrow and I will send the link in the group. So just in case if you want to catch up, please do make sure to watch that lesson again. Because if you don't and you fall behind, you will get lost when we get to problems where we solve functions. I'll give you an example, guys. I'll just give you a very simple example, almost similar to what we did. So let's say in grade 12, also in grade 10, 11, you'll be given something similar to that. They're just going to draw a straight line. And then after drawing a straight line, then from there, let's say they also do another graph like that. So they will say this is the graph of F and this is the graph of G. So they give you equations for both. Let's say they say this is Y, it's equals to, obviously gradient is positive, let's say maybe 3, and then they say plus Q. And again, this is the graph of G. They say for this one of graph of G, they say it's Y, because it's parabola, they say maybe it's Y, it's equals to, let's say, x negative x squared plus 4. I'm giving an example, guys. Plus what's it? Let's say plus 5. This is just an example. So in today's lesson, I taught you guys all regarding a straight line. So already you know, for this type of a straight line, our gradient is positive, and again our q value has to be positive. Why? Because the straight line touches the y-axis above the origin. So that means that point over there, this is where that graph and that straight line graph cuts the y-axis. So this is the point of intersection where that graph and that one intersect. But because this is what I'm going to teach you on our next lesson, a parabola, so that you also know all the properties of a parabola. So based on a mini lesson that I gave you yesterday, guys, I said that one or that number represents where your parabola touches the y-axis, which means already if they ask you anything regarding that straight line, you already know that that q is 5. You don't need to calculate it. Why? Because from this equation for that parabola, they say that one over there is 5, and you know 5 is that point. Why is it that point? Is because of that's where that graph touches the y-axis. This is what we call the turning point of a graph, because it goes straight up, then it turns there. That's why we call that point a turning point. So don't worry that much about that one. And again, I said this graph has got a negative value. Remember, I said for a graph like that, always our A must be negative because it's a Z shape. For it to make sense, that's when we do this, then you know it's a Z shape. When it's a Z shape, it means the A value is less than 0. Otherwise, the A value is a negative value. So that's why you need to know the standard form of each and every type of what is it, a function. So the general formula for this one I said is a x squared plus bx plus c. This is a quadratic function, guys. So that c value is that same c value from the straight line being y is equals to mx plus c. So you can either use c or you can use q. It doesn't matter. So that is why I'm saying that c is that one over there. In this case, where the straight line touches that. But if that straight line, it was passing somewhere there, then 5 wasn't going to be that point where the straight line cuts that point over there. So that means it was going to be a different number, but a number which is greater than or which is above 5. So, and again, we know the A value has to be negative for that one because of that Z shape. So in functions, guys, it's either they want you to draw or they want you to determine the equation. So in today's lesson, I taught you how to draw a straight line and again how to determine an equation of a straight line. So on our next lesson, I'm going to do a similar lesson where I teach you all that you need to know about a parabola, and again we're going to plot, and again we're going to determine an equation from the given information. So guys, make sure that you don't miss any of my upcoming lessons. So remember, towards exams or during exams, I won't be teaching all of this. I'll just be treating your mid-year exam questions. So there won't be time to be teaching you any of these guys. I assume they're going to teach you this in class, and again, you can still catch up. So ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our lesson for today. But before I say have a good night, is there someone who's got a question, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Shreyas, your question?
No, sir. No, sir.
Oh, no question. Okay. Anyone who's got a question?
No, sir.
Okay, guys. Thanks very much for joining. My name is Desmond, and I'm out.
Thank you.